What's up, Prairie Lakes Church? Welcome. Hey, I am glad to be here, and we're going to switch it up a little bit. I'm glad to be here, whether you're glad to be here or not. How about that? Hey, if this is your first weekend with us, and you're kind of wondering what's the deal with all the energy coming from the guy on the screen. First of all, my name's Jesse. Hi, glad that you're here. Second of all, the rest of us know that. Back on, it was like 7 weeks ago now, early August, I went in for a scheduled, but it was open heart surgery, and it went very well, but I just have not been around you for like 7 weeks, and I am so very glad to be back, okay? Couple things, okay, as we get going here. First is this, thank you for all your, I'm doing very well, honestly. Surgery went well, recovery went well. I'm doing the cardiac rehab stuff, and I'm not pushing it too hard. And seriously, I'm doing great. As I've been starting to talk to people again, and seeing people I haven't seen for a while, the piece of feedback that I just got this all the time was, wow, you look really good. Like, wow, you look really, and like I started like, I'm like when it was first being said, it felt really good to hear. I'm like, oh, thank you so much. But then I kept hearing it. I started thinking like, had the wheels kind of come off before surgery? How low had the bar kind of fall? But anyway, so I'm doing very well. Number one, and the number two is this. Okay, thank you. For so many things, okay, but real specifically, thank you for all the cards and the text messages and the phone calls and the emails and the visits up to Mayo and the visits at my house when I was still just sitting in my chair. Thank you for all the prayers and all the support while we were gone. We felt so loved and so cared for. One of the questions I got asked before, and even, in the few weeks following surgery was, aren't you anxious? Aren't you anxious about everything that's going on? Aren't you anxious to get back? Aren't you just chomping at the bit? And for sure, I thought a lot about our church while I was gone, and the time away, the last couple of weeks at the very least were just great to think about it and pray and write some stuff down. It was really good, so I thought a lot about it. But I just want to tell you, I was not anxious at all. Not at all about how things were going. And so I just need to say thanks to a few people specifically. Pastor John, Pastor Chip, turns out those dudes can still preach. But they had to take on a lot more while I was gone. And it was just such a blessing to sit there in my chair on Sundays and just be pastored by them and just know that things in the weekend were great. So thanks to both of them. We have a fantastic staff executive team. And I know, me not being around the table there was a direct impact there. And guys, we got a lot of big stuff going on. Not bad stuff, big stuff, okay? And we didn't miss a beat. And so Zach and Chris and Corey and Cody, I'm so grateful for you guys. And we had fall kickoff stuff, and we have this huge project in Decorah, and we're updating ministry strategies and database and all these things, and they're just moving forward, and they just continued. In fact, too well, a little too smooth while I was gone. How about that? I'm so very grateful. I'm so very excited to be back. So I'm glad that you're joining us this weekend. Thanks for all the prayers. God is really good. Last thing I want to say is this. I know bad stuff happens, tough stuff happens, hard stuff happens to people every single day. My story is not unique there. And I know a lot of people walk through hard stuff without Jesus, and they walk through a lot of hard stuff without Jesus' family and without his body. And it's just night and day walking through with him and walking through with his family. And so thank you so much for being the body of Christ to me and my family. It's cool to be a part of a church family that spans an entire state. And we just felt all the love and support in the world. And so thanks for that, and thanks for your continued prayers. Okay, enough of that. How about that? Last weekend, we got a chance to start a series that we're going to continue this weekend. And Pastor John kicked us off in this series called The Skeptic's Guide to the Bible. The Skeptic's Guide to the Bible. And we're writing with the skeptic in mind, whether that's you to a T, or whether there's just part of you that's skeptical. Maybe you believe some stuff, and maybe you believe most of it, but there's a part of it that's just kind of, we're writing with you in mind. And so the posture and the tone of this series is going to be really open. Not defensive. This is a safe place to ask questions and to wrestle. And so we have a fantastic resource available for you. I know we sold out of, we didn't sell out. We sold a bunch of them last week. Just a great book resource that I think you can still get it at your campus. Or you can get it digitally still, and it's great for your individual study. It's great for group study. A lot of us are in groups right now, but every week in this book it follows kind of the same pattern. We're following along with the weeks or so on and so forth, but we're going to kind of take you through a similar journey every week. And so there's some intentionality there. Hopefully you kind of fall into that rhythm. And not only that, but the whole book is actually designed with some intentionality in mind as well. So last week, Pastor John started talking to us about origins. Makes sense to start with origins, right? How did we get this book? Where did it come from? And it turns out it's just magic. Just magic. We don't know. No, that's not true. You go back, prayrelakechurch.org. He had a fantastic message. Again, the resource is so great. Take a look at that. I was at Cedar Falls for the first time. I was anywhere for the first time last week, and I was just watching people snap pictures of the screens. Maybe you did that too. So that's where we were last week. So here we are, week 2 now. Week 2, and I'm sure you can read that. But week 2, even if you've got the book in front of you as you're taking notes, we're talking about this thing called exegesis. How about that? Okay, exegesis. Exegesis is a word that if you can say it correctly, it makes you sound smarter than you really are, which is important. It's good strategy. People don't ask you questions when you sound smart, okay? So do that. But I do know what it means because I have a student loan debt that proves it. And here's what it means. It's a Greek word, okay? And it's a compound Greek word, ex meaning out of, okay? So we still use that in our language today, like exit, get out of here. If you want to get out of here, go here. Ex, out of, or drawing out from. And then Jesus, which is kind of means knowledge. And so when we're trying to exegete something in the Bible, we're trying to draw out the meaning of it so that we know what the author meant when they wrote it. That's what exegesis is. We're trying to go to the Bible, draw out what the author meant when they wrote it. But here's the deal, because inevitably when we do that, we are going to come across something or a number of different things in the Bible that when we go to read it and we try to understand it, the skeptic in us is going to start whispering or maybe even shouting something like this. There is a lot of crazy stuff in there. There's a lot of crazy stuff in there, okay? And so what do we mean by crazy? Well, here's what we mean. I think there's probably several categories. I want to talk about 2 of them. There's just some stuff in the Bible that's just not going to sound right to us, especially us in 2023. 2 big categories that sound crazy when we read it. Number 1, there's some stuff in there that's going to feel like more like fantasy than reality, okay? And we can't spend a lot of time. This is one of those messages that I cut maybe more out of it than left in it. And so you're welcome, by the way, because we'd be here forever. We just don't have a lot of time to talk about this one, but here's what I want to say, okay? We're probably used to fantasy. The stuff that's in the Bible, we're used to it. We're just used to it in Harry Potter or Star Wars, right? It's fantasy. It's kind of fiction. It just feels kind of like fiction, The problem is when you read Scripture, they don't think it's fiction. They're talking about it as though it really happened in the real world, okay? So what do we do with that? Well, again, we don't have a ton of time, but let me just say this. The Bible is really all about God. And God is a spirit. He's a person, but he's a spirit, and he's supernatural. He can do kind of whatever he wants. So here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say it would be kind of weird if there weren't supernatural things in the Bible, you know? Okay, but that's about all we have time to say, okay? There's some crazy stuff in there that may strike you as that, number one. Number two is this, and this is really what I'm spending a lot of time on, because I think this is where the skeptic gets super loud, understandably. There's just some stuff in the Bible that just, it feels like sanctioned evil, okay? Not just evil, like sanctioned evil, like not just bad people doing bad things, but like good people doing bad things, and that's okay to do, apparently. Take this passage from Ezekiel, for example, all right? It's from Ezekiel 24. And this is Ezekiel talking. Ezekiel's a prophet. We'll talk a little bit about what that is. But here's what he says. The word of the Lord came to me. God spoke to me, and here's what he said. Son of man, which is a term for Ezekiel, hey, with one blow, I, God, am about to take away from you the delight of your eyes. Yet do not lament or weep or shed any tears. You can groan quietly, but don't mourn for the dead. Keep your turban fastened and your sandals on your feet. Do not cover your mustache and beard or eat at the customary food of mourners. So I, Ezekiel, spoke to the people in the morning, and in the evening, my wife died. And the next morning, I did as I commanded. Crazy. That's crazy, right? That's crazy. So Ezekiel's a prophet, kind of like we said, meaning that he's, at least at this time, he's someone who God speaks to directly, supposedly, and then his job is to say whatever God told him to say to God's people, or to do whatever God told him to do. That was kind of his job. And so what God said was that, Ezekiel, your wife is going to die. And I'm telling you right now. But when she does, you can't mourn. You can't grieve. And so, this is what Ezekiel did. That's even the crazier part, right? Join us for our upcoming series in Ezekiel, where we will be passing out anxiety meds every single weekend. Invite a friend. Because it's crazy. It's crazy, right? Like there's reasons why we don't like do series in these books. And listen, I know we're in this series right now called Skeptic's Guide to the Bible, and then we're trying to talk to you as though you are skeptics, whether you are or you aren't. But let's just say this. Many of us in the room, if you're listening to my voice, you're in the room, you're watching online, whatever, a lot of us, maybe even most of us, don't consider ourselves skeptics. We don't. In fact, some of us may even feel like I'm the opposite of a skeptic, okay? I'm the faithful. I'm the believer, while the rest of the world rejects God and rejects the Bible and just goes to hell in a handbasket. I'm going to stay true to it. I'm going to stand on it. I'm going to believe it, and doggone it, I'm going to defend it. And if that's us, here's what inevitably that's going to mean. Here's the dynamic that's going to create. Okay, some of us have been in this thing. We've been in church. We've been in a relationship with Jesus. We've been in the faith. We've been in the Bible. We've just been in for so long. Some of us that we've forgotten. Really have. We've kind of forgotten just how crazy some of this stuff in the Bible sounds. Especially sounds to people who haven't been in. That's a crazy story we just read. It just is. Okay? The other side of that same coin is this. Others of us feel, potentially even today, right? We feel like we could never be in. We could never be in. Why? Because some of this stuff is just so crazy. It just sounds so crazy. You know, like you guys believe in a God that did that? You worship a God who at one point killed his followers' wives and then says, don't cry about it? And if we were to be honest, and it's hard to be sometimes, but if we were to be honest, it seems like stories like that are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to some of the things that God says or God does or God's people say or God's people do. So, what do we do? What do we do with all that? What do we do with all the crazy stuff in the Bible? Not just the stuff that feels too good to be true, but the stuff that we wish just weren't. I don't know. Have a great week. I don't know. I've been away for 6 weeks. So here's what I want to do. Okay, here's what I want to do. I want to go back to that. I chose that passage in Ezekiel because I don't want to just breeze over it. I want to kind of use it as an example, and I just want to show you how I navigate some of that crazy stuff personally. Okay. But as I do, I just want to get out ahead of something, just real quick. And I'm going to give you the good news and the bad news. We're going to look at this passage of scripture again, and we're going to try to exegete it. Okay, we're going to try to figure out what it means and just see where that goes. But good news, bad news. Okay, bad news first, always. Bad news is this: there is no silver bullet to navigating some of this stuff. There isn't, and it's not easy. Okay. If you want to exegete it, it's going to require some work on your part. Maybe some work you don't want to do. I get that. Maybe some study. Maybe some study over time. And then even this, it kind of gets a little worse, because even when you do it and you do it well, you exegete well, even when you do it well, it might not satisfy every discomfort we have or every question we have about what we just read. Okay? So that's the bad news. I just want to get out ahead of that. Okay, bad news. Here's the good news. You can do this. Whether you've been in for a long time or out, okay? Anybody can do this. The principles we're going to talk about, they're transferable. They're not just expert principles, they're transferable. And they're even accessible. We got this Skeptics books that's so good. I can't recommend more highly the Bible Project, BibleProject.com. I mean, if you just go to BibleProject.com and type in like Ezekiel, for example, it's unbelievable, the stuff that's there and how they present it and how clear it is. So it's accessible, it's transferable, anybody can do it, okay? We want to help you navigate some of this crazy stuff that's in the Bible. Why? Because the last thing we want is this for to be a barrier to you in your own personal journey with God, whether you're kind of coming towards Him or still just kind of wrestling, number one, okay? And number two, we just want you to be, if you're already, we want you to be ready to give an answer. Okay, so turns out crazy is not limited to the world of the Bible. It's going to just help us as we're navigating some of the crazy stuff in life. So let's do this. Let's put the Ezekiel passage back up there one more time. We're going to read this again together. Maybe we don't want to do that, but we're going to do it anyways. Okay, here's the story again. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, with one blow I'm about to take away from you the delight of your eyes, yet don't lament or weep or shed any tears. You can groan quietly. Don't mourn from the dead. Keep your turban fastened and your sandals on your feet. Don't cover your mustache or beard or eat the customary food of mourners. And so I spoke to the people in the morning, and in the evening my wife died. And the next morning I did as I had been commanded. So how do we navigate that? How do we navigate that? Here's the word I want you to write down. It's kind of the heading if you're taking notes this weekend. The word is context. Context, 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 context. Remember, this is not going to explain everything away. It's not going to solve all of your questions. It's not a silver bullet, but I think it's going to be super helpful. Context, context, okay? What we just did before is we put 9 verses up there from a book. 9 verses from chapter 24, I think it was, okay? There are 27 more verses in chapter 24. There are 48 more chapters in the entire book of Ezekiel, and there are 36 books in the Old Testament, of which Ezekiel is a part of, and there's 66 books in the whole New Testament. And actually, it's important that we have a sense of that whole context so that we understand what's going on in these 9 verses. Here's what I'm trying to get you to consider. I'm not trying to misdirect. Here's what I'm trying to get you to consider. Whenever you read something in the Bible that feels crazy, whenever you do, okay, the greater context might help to explain it. It's not going to explain it away, but it might help so you can kind of wrap your mind around it at least. There's a real difference there, okay? There's a real difference there between explaining it and explaining it away, all right? There's a real difference there. And maybe it's just because I'm sensitive to debate season right now, okay? Everybody wants to explain everything away. Nobody wants to explain anything, right? We all know the difference between those two. It's super irritating when I want you to, nope, come on, don't spin it. Don't minimize it. Nope, come on. I get that. There's a very real difference between those two. I'm not trying to explain anything away. I do want to give you some tools to help maybe explain what the author is saying and why it's in there, okay? All right. So context. There's kind of 4 I want to just leverage on this passage. Let's talk about them real quick here. There's biblical context. So in other words, there's something to the overarching story of the whole Bible, Genesis to Revelation, that we need to understand so that we understand these 9 verses. And I'll show you, hopefully, how to do that. But biblical context, the whole big overarching narrative story of the Bible. The historical or the cultural context, okay? There's things that are happening in Ezekiel's world that are actually helpful to understand what's going on there. It doesn't explain it away, but it's going to help explain it, okay? Number 2. Number 3, the literary context. What kind of writing is this? And as we go, that's not going to be as helpful for this one, but I'm going to tell you when it is and why it's important. But number 4, and this one's going to be super helpful for Ezekiel, it's the textual context. In other words, like I said, there's 48 chapters in this one book of Ezekiel, and then chapters and verses are something we invented, okay? These was just one big book at one point, right? So there's something that happened early in the story, there's something that happens right before and right after and later on that are going to help us understand what's going on. Not explain it, but help us understand it. So what I want to do is the next slide is going to be a cheat sheet. We can go ahead and put that up there. We're going to keep this up there, okay, as we kind of think through these 9 verses in Ezekiel. Because these different types of contexts, which we define now, I want to just show you what they're going to help you do, not just in these 9 verses that we've looked at. They're going to help you in any part of the Bible when you come across something that's crazy. If we understand the biblical context, the whole story of the Bible, here's what's going to be helpful there. We're going to understand what God did with his people then versus what God does with his people now. Same God, but it's different. Not going to explain it away, but it's going to explain it. Okay? When we understand the historical or cultural context, here's what's going to help us understand. We're going to understand what God permitted or why he permitted things then when he does not now. Because those are different as well. All right? When we understand the literary context, what kind of writing is this? Is it poetry? Is it law? Is it narrative? Is it apocalypse? There's all kinds of different writing, sometimes even in the same book. It's going to help us understand what is symbolically true versus what is literally true. And that may trip you up. I don't have time. I'm sorry. I wish I had time to kind of delve into that a little bit. We saw this a little bit like when we did Proverbs, right? There's principles that are true, but that's different. It's a different kind of truth than promises that are true. Jesus promises us to never leave us or forsake us. 100% true, all the time true. Proverbs says, you train up a child in the way he'll go, they won't depart from it. It's a great principle. It's a true principle. It's not a promise. It's not true. It is true. It's not true in the same way. Okay? So you got to understand a little bit of the literary genre, or what kind of writing is this, so that we understand in what way is it true. And the last one is this. We understand the textual context. That's going to help us, understand what the author meant. Like, what did the author mean? Not what do I think he means. What do I feel? No. We can get there. That's important. What does this mean for me? No. That's not where we start. We got to start with what the author meant instead of what I might be reading into it. We talked about exegesis, drawing out from the text. One of the biggest mistakes that modern readers and interpreters of the Bible make is the opposite, eisegesis. Ex is out of, eis is into. A lot of times we read meaning into that text because we're just bringing our 2023 understanding or our life experiences or our assumptions into that text, and then we're reading that meaning into it. Exegesis is going to help us check that at the door and get back into the world of that author so that we can get that meaning first and then maybe understand how to apply it in our world today. Okay, so it's going to stay up there if you're taking notes. All right. Here we go. So, start with biblical context, all right? What is the biblical context that's so important, not just for this passage in Ezekiel that we read, but for those 9, but for the whole book, really. How does it fit into the larger biblical story? And then maybe help us see why God operated the way that he apparently did. Because to my knowledge, I haven't met any pastors today that are telling me that same story. Thank God. So Ezekiel, the book of Ezekiel is in our Old Testament. The Old Testament is one of the first 36 books of the 66 in the Bible. And when the early church, post-Jesus, started collecting New Testament books, they distinguished them from the Old Testament, and they didn't call it the New Testament and Old Testament. They called it the New Covenant, and they called it the Old Covenant. They called these first 36 books, of which Ezekiel is a part of, the Old Covenant. Not Testament, but Covenant, okay? So think about the Bible in terms of like a book with two parts, the Old Covenant part and the New Covenant part. Same God, same story, two different parts, okay? What's a covenant? What's a covenant? Well, a covenant is basically a relationship that's based on a promise. A relationship that's based on a promise. Kind of like a Christian understanding of marriage. We call a marriage a covenant relationship. It's a relationship that's based on a promise. The relationship is being together, being intimate, sharing a life. If God wills, it's building a family, it's creating a future, it's all these things. Lots of cool stuff in this relationship. But this relationship rests on a promise or a commitment between these two people. And for marriage, it's promised to be faithful, right? It's richer for poorer, sickness and in health, love and to cherish, forsaking all others, till death do us part, right? That's the promise. That's a covenant relationship. It's a relationship based on a promise. And the big story of the Bible is also the story of a covenant relationship. But at one point, it's a different kind of covenant relationship. So we're living in part 2 of that story today, you and I. We're living in the new covenant part of that story. And here's what that means. That means that today, God is in a relationship with anybody, no matter who you are, where you've been, what you've done, what's been done to you, okay? God is in a relationship with anybody because of Jesus. And Jesus' promise fulfilled to us. God makes his promise to us through Jesus. That's his part. I'm going to pay for anything that you've done. I'm going to remove all of the sin that stands between you and me, and I'm going to save you out of that, and you'll be part of my family. That's God's part, and our part is to just trust him, to believe that, first and foremost, and then just to follow him, right? His ways are our ways. That's the and it's for anybody, right? That's the new covenant that we're in. Part 2 of the story, but that's not the way it was when Ezekiel was walking the earth. Different covenant. Different way of being in relationships. Same God, different terms. During part 1 of the story, the Old Covenant, God he wasn't in relationship with anyone and everyone. That's just not how it was. He made this covenant with a specific group of people, the people of Israel, and the promise that he made to them and that they were making to him was also different. It wasn't, my sons saved you from your sins, and if you only believe, that's not how it was. The promise that served as the foundation of this relationship was just really different. So here's the old covenant promise between God and his people. Same promise that Ezekiel lived under. Here it is, okay? This is from Deuteronomy 28. This is where the covenant first begins. There's Moses in Egypt. And this is what God says. It goes, if you fully obey the Lord your God and you carefully follow all of his commands, as I'm giving you today. Moses is coming down the mountain, 10 commandments. So if you follow all of these, the Lord your God will set you high above all the nations of the earth, and all these blessings will come on you and accompany you if you obey. That's the terms of the covenant, okay? I'm going to bless you if you obey. And here's all these there are all these blessings. There was long life and living in the land and growth and health and just a bunch of cool stuff, okay? You just got to obey. That's one side of it. And then verse 15, here's the other side of that. If you don't, the Lord your God, if you don't obey the Lord your God, and you don't carefully follow all of his commands and decrees I'm giving you today, then there's curses that are coming on. There's consequences. And you know, it's you're going to lose the land, and you're going to lose your health, and you're going to be conquered, and you're even going to die. And the people of Israel look at this covenant and they go, that sounds awesome. We just follow commands, we get all these blessings, and we just don't do all this bad stuff? Yeah, sign us up. They're in. And this isn't weird, this is our justice system. You do good things and you won't get in trouble, and you may even get rewarded. You do bad things and you're going to get in trouble. You're going to get punished. Okay? Now the rest of the story of the Old Covenant, and this is really the story of the Old Testament, the first 36 books of the Bible, the rest of the story is this. It's this dynamic that plays out over and over and over and over and over again. All the way up to Ezekiel's day. Centuries, okay? The Israelites follow, then they don't, then they get warned, then they get punished, then they return, then they follow, then they don't. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. But it gets worse. It gets worse. Eventually they start not coming back to God. They just continue to go their own way. They started living for centuries like they could do whatever they wanted, to whoever they wanted, whenever they wanted. That's the biblical narrative, okay? That's the biblical context. Now that leads us to the next type of context, which is historical. What was going on in Ezekiel's world when he was walking around right before God did and says this crazy thing? What was going on? Well, if you open up the book of Ezekiel, here's what you learn. You learn that the nation of Babylon had come in 5 years ago and conquered the nation of Israel, and they chipped some people off. But then they allowed some people to stay 5 years ago, okay? In other words, they disobeyed, and now they were suffering the consequences that God told them centuries before that would happen, because they broke the covenant. But we got to unpack this a little bit, because we're not going to quite grab it. So let's not just do historical context. Let's do textual context. The book of Ezekiel earlier on will explain to us the nature of these people's disobedience and what they were doing at this time. Okay, so chapters 1 through 11 of Ezekiel. Here's what we learn. We learned that Israel had for centuries just chosen to worship pagan gods and other gods from other nations, like Egypt's nature gods, or the Mesopotamian god of fertility, Tammuz, which is mentioned in the book of Ezekiel. And you're like, well, who cares? Well, they're worshiping God, we're worshiping their God, like, who cares? Well, you got to kind of know what worshiping meant and how different worshiping the God of the Bible was from these other gods. Here's what it meant to worship the God of the Bible. Okay, because here's what he said. Here's all of his laws. Here's all of his commands. Here's the things they were supposed to do. Here's what it looked like to worship Yahweh. It looked like the 10 Commandments. Okay, so worship the one true God. Don't try to make him into an idol. Don't worship any other idols. Don't murder. Tell the truth. Honor your parents. Don't cheat. Don't lie. Don't steal. Quit coveting what your neighbor has. All those things. That's what it looked like. That was worship. It looked like loving God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind and all your strength. They would say that prayer every day from Deuteronomy 6. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. Worship him only, and love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, love your neighbor. Okay? It looked like making sacrifices of animals or grains. Why? Because you did that to acknowledge that you often fell short of doing what you ought to do. And that when you fall short of those things, there's consequences, right? Like when you didn't love your neighbor in the way that you should, or when you did cheat, or when you did lie, there's consequences. And so we make these sacrifices to remind us that there is a right, and there is a wrong, and there is a penalty, and this stuff really matters. That's what worship of this God of the Bible looked like. And it was so different than what anybody else did. And so when Scripture says, well, they started worshiping idols, they started worshiping the god of Tammuz, they started worshiping these Egyptian gods, and you go like, well, who cares? They stopped doing all these good things, and they worshiped this fertility god by having sex with whoever they wanted. Or they worshiped this Assyrian god by sacrificing their babies. Literally. Or they cheat their neighbor out of whatever, or they chase after whatever, or they kill whoever, because it didn't matter. Because these guys weren't real. There wasn't a God that was going to hold them accountable. There's only one that did that. For centuries, Israel rejects this one God. And instead, they start worshiping other gods. And that's what that really meant. They just do whatever they want, okay? And they just care less. They could care less about their brothers and sisters in poverty. They could care less about widows and children. All of you are on your own. And they do this for centuries, and it's corrupt from the top down. They become brutal, oppressive, animalistic, dangerous people who are supposed to be, God says, a city on a hill, a light for the world, a people set apart to point people to this one true God who is the author of what's right and wrong. And if you live his ways, you'll live a healthy and flourishing life. And this group of people that God had set up to do that is doing anything but. So when they disobey, it's a big time tragedy, not just for them, but for the whole world. But for the whole world. We have the story of a woman who this man Ezekiel loves dearly. And one life is precious to God. And it's symbolic of what's going on as hundreds and thousands and millions of people's lives hang in the balance. Okay? So God makes good on his promise to allow the nation of Israel to suffer the consequences of what they've done for generations, which is what happens. But even after all of this, even after Babylon sweeps in and deports a bunch of them, the people who are remaining start saying this: we're fine. Fine, it's fine. We're going to be fine. Just a blip on the radar. And so now, okay, with all that biblical, historical, and textual context in mind, we get to this crazy passage of Ezekiel 24. And God says to Ezekiel, tomorrow is when your wife's going to die. And here's what we have to understand. And this is hard, okay? But the reality is all of us are going to die one day. I promise you, okay? And only God knows when. And sometimes we can see it coming and sometimes we can't, but God always can. And God tells Ezekiel, tomorrow's going to be the day. Tomorrow's going to be her day. And I want you to know. Because when it happens, Ezekiel, I know, but I need you to do something. And God always has a purpose. I mean, he uses even horrible things, bad things, for things that are good. So here's how the story continues in chapter 24. Here's what he says. The people asked me, why don't you tell us what these things have to do with us? Why are you acting like this, right? You know, your wife died, you're not even mourning. What is the deal? You're a weirdo. What are you doing? So I said to them, the word of the Lord came to me, and here's what God said. He said, say to the people of Israel, this is what the sovereign Lord says, I'm about to desecrate my sanctuary, the temple that you think I dwell in, God says. The stronghold in which you take pride, the delight of your eyes, the object of your affection. Just like you love this temple, but really don't live anything like what the temple tells you to live. I'm going to take that away from you because Babylon's going to come and they're going to tear it all down and you're going to go away. And by the way, you're not even going to have time. You won't mourn. The sons and daughters you left behind will fall by the sword. You'll do as I have done. You'll not cover your mustache, your beard, eat the customary food of mourners. You're going to keep your turbans on your hands, on your heads, your sandals on your feet. You won't mourn or weep or waste away because of your sins and groan among yourselves. Ezekiel will be a sign to you. You will do just as he's done. When this happens, you will know that I'm the sovereign Lord. Just like Ezekiel isn't mourning for his wife, you're not going to have time to mourn for everybody that you've lost because for generations and generations and generations, you've left me and you've rejected me and you've rejected my ways and you've done whatever you wanted and you treated everybody with violence. And this is what's going to happen. And when it happens to you, maybe then you'll know. I am real. And I need you to stop living how you're living. And I need you to turn back, and you're not. Ezekiel says, what you see me live through, you will live through as well. And you need to know that as you continue in your rebellion, God will continue to allow you to suffer the consequences of it. You're not safe. You're not okay. Babylon's coming back, okay? And when you're sitting in that moment, then maybe you might know. And then maybe you'll turn back. Here's what's crazy, okay? Because this is not where the story ends. Later on in Ezekiel, here's what God says to Ezekiel, and then through Ezekiel to these people, okay? This is not where the story ends. Here's what he says, the Ezekiel 36, okay? Again, the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, when the people of Israel were living in their own land and they defiled it by their conduct and their actions, so I poured out my wrath on them because they had shed blood in the land and because they had defiled it with their idols. I dispersed them among the nations and they were scattered through the country as I judged them according to their conduct and their actions. That's the part of the story we saw. And then it says this. Therefore say to the Israelites, this is what the sovereign Lord says. It's not for your sake, people of Israel, that I'm going to do these things I'm about to tell you, but for the sake of my holy name, which you've profaned among the nations where you've gone. In other words, God says, I'm going to do something, but I want you to know when I do it, it's not for your sake, it's for mine. And it's for my sake because I need the rest of the world to know who I actually am. I will show the holiness of my great name, which has been profaned among the nations, because the way you're living, Israel, the name you've profaned among them. And then the nations will know that I'm the Lord, declares the sovereign Lord, when I am proved holy through you before their eyes. So just this nation that has been rebellious for generations, God says, I'm going to do something, and then through you, as the nations watch, they will see how holy I am. And what is God going to do in these nations of Israel? So I'm going to take you, Israel, out of the nations, and I'm going to gather you from all the countries. I'm going to bring you back into your land, and I'll sprinkle clean water on you, and you'll be clean, and I'll cleanse you from all your impurities and from all of your idols, and I'll give you a new heart, and I'll put a new spirit in you, and I'll remove from you your heart of stone. I'm going to give you a heart of flesh, and I will put my capital S Holy Spirit in you, and I'll move you to follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. And so now here's what we see. We see a part of the story that you and I get a chance to live in. Because now we live in a time where we just get to admit, I fall short all the time. And Jesus paid it all for me. And when we live that out, and when we believe that, and we start watching what God does in us and through us, the rest of the world knows it's not because we're so great, it's because our God is so great. And because our Jesus is so alive. And because his spirit and his ways. It doesn't explain everything away, okay? It doesn't. But context is going to help. Context is going to help. I hope that you're leaning into this a little bit. I know this is a tough one. There's some crazy stuff in there, okay? But just remember the context. Remember you're part of a bigger story. Remember it's not the same story that it was. Remember you're still living this story out. Let me pray for us. God, I know that there's a lot of crazy stuff in the Bible. I know that's a big time barrier for a lot of us. Help us. Help us. And God, remind us that this word of yours is alive and it's active. And you speak to us through it today. Jesus, in your name we pray. Amen.